Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. I am delighted to be joined today by William Cobb. We will be discussing marketing effectiveness. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Bill, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. And as you mentioned in our conversation before the show began, I want to thank you for your military service. And now I want to ask you to take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Yes, I did serve in the military, and it was a good experience for this individual, as it sometimes proves to be for many others. When I got out of the military, I started my career as a management trainee in the consumer finance industry. And as a result of that, I got opportunities to move forward into other disciplines. The biggest challenge for me, I think, was back in the days when I was working in New York City, when New York City was going broke back in the 1970s. And that's when I got my first big promotion and an opportunity to run a division of a larger company. I am now a retired Fortune 50 executive. I worked my way up the corporate ladder in the communications industry. And at the highlight of my career, I was responsible for a little over $1 billion of corporate revenue and about 3,300 associates. So it was one of those wonderful experiences where you never run out of work. It was really quite an event. Anyway, like most corporate executives, when you retire, you can't stop and do nothing. So I became a consultant. I wrote a couple of books, one called Business Strategy and one on entrepreneurship, and both of those books were used as teaching tools in my consulting business. When that particular assignment got boring, to be honest with you, I moved over and became a contract instructor. In the last several years, I've been doing that. I have been a contract instructor at Colorado State University for their business college. And also now I do work with the Small Business Administration, trying to help some of our younger companies get up and get going. So my background is pretty diverse. I've had 17 job titles. I've been promoted a number of times and recruited a number of times. And the one thing that has helped me to advance my career and help others is a real clear understanding of marketing effectiveness.
Well, the first question I have to ask you is that the Colorado River behind you?
Yes, it is. That is a picture I took when we were in Glenwood Springs, which is up here in the Rocky Mountains, when I was there with my grandchildren. And that is the mighty Colorado River you're looking at before it starts trickling down across Utah and into Grand Canyon.
Isn't that what's referred to as God's country?
I know how lucky I am to live here. Yes.
All right. Marketing effectiveness. Why is it necessary to even say effectiveness? Because if your marketing is no good, then you're not really marketing. So what's marketing and how do you make it effective?
Well, the obvious point here is that people spend a lot of money on marketing. and they often do not get the result or the return that they're trying to get from that investment. So I have a term that I introduce when I start these sessions. I tell them, you may be transaction trapped. Now, transaction traps meaning you're always looking for the next opportunity, which is exactly the same opportunity you've had before, and you keep repeating that same effort over and over again, looking for different results. Well, you don't get different results for doing the same thing. You only get different results when you do something different. So what I try to do is in my consulting sessions or my speaking sessions is introduce them to 4 tactics that change those dynamics without spending a great deal of money. In other words, spend the same budget you have, just do these 4 things differently. And if you do that, you'd be amazed what the effect can be. I was successful with it in my own career, and I've been successful applying that to help others.
I have to ask a question. What are the 4 tactics?
Well, the first one is
Just feed them to me. I'm
look,
gonna take them.
you got to ask. The first one has to do with the transaction itself. And basically, I introduced the concept of looking at the total transaction, not just the contractual portion of it, where you give me a purchase order, I give you something for it, but what went into making that transaction happen? What were the decision points and who were the decision makers to enable that transaction to occur? An example I used was early in my career, I was working for Westinghouse Supply. And Westinghouse Supply was the distribution arm for all the Westinghouse products. Well, my first promotion was out of New York into Chicago, and I took over the Northwestern region in Chicago, Illinois. And we had 2 divisions there. We had an industrial division and we had a construction division. The industrial division was doing very well. We sold big motors to the steel industry. They would pour steel all over them and have to buy new motors. It was a wonderful business. But our construction industry was doing terrible. And after you peel the onion back and looked at what was going on, we were doing the same thing over and over again, basically getting on the bidders list, submitting our proposals, and basically being used as a pricing benchmark by the contractors to buy stuff from other people. So after we came to terms with that reality, we took the approach that I'm suggesting. What's involved in this total transaction for a construction product purchase? Well, you got to go back to what was the design? Who put the design together? And why did they choose the products that they put into those blueprints? Well, what we wound up doing is dividing our sales force. And we still had a group that talked to the contractors because we needed to have that opportunity. But we started calling on architects and engineers, introducing our products ahead of the curve so that we were specified on the blueprints when the documents came out. So when the contractors had to look at the documents and make a choice, the choice they were suggested to take was buy our product because we're in the blueprints. So there's an example of how changing the dynamics of the transaction, just simply by following it back and finding out what are the components that enable it to happen. So that's the first one that I use.
Number 2.
And by the way, it worked.
I'm sure it did. What was the second? Or what is the second?
The second one is really interesting. It's really the part of my career that exploded. I went to work at the turn of the, I call it the turn of the communications industry, when they started breaking up Ma Bell. I went to work for a company called Executone in Long Island City, New York. And Executone made intercoms, the kind of intercoms that in the olden days went between executives and their secretaries. Well, as the new electronic key systems, telephone systems came into the market, all of them had that capability. Each one of them had an intercom on it. You could call anybody who had a phone, pushing a button, and you didn't need these other kinds of intercom systems. So the company was wise enough to know they had to transition. They had to change from what they were doing to providing a newer product. And they wisely picked the electronic key systems, the telephone systems. Well, the company sold through independent distributors. They had 130 distributors that were located all across the country, and each one of them represented the Executone product. Well, now Executone was introducing a whole new product line, much more sophisticated than the ones that this group of individuals had previously worked with. So the question became, how are we going to transition not only our company, but the distribution arm that we depended upon in order to capture the market that we needed? Well, I got promoted to a job called Manager of Distributor Relations, is Vice President, pardon me, I got a Vice President title. But what I looked at was, how did other companies do this? How did they manage a group of independent distributors and get the quality and service and performance from them? And you look at McDonald's or any of those and say, McDonald's in particular is amazing. Any McDonald's you walk into in the United States is very much like the other one you walk into, and they're clean and they're neat and performance. So we peeled the onion back, and I said, what do we have to do to enable our distributors to operate like that? And we came up with a suggestion that we needed to give them operating manuals, just like you get when you buy the franchise from McDonald's. We had to build an operating manual that showed them the bill of material, what the test points were, and how they should be installed. Well, we were good at telling them how to sell it, but the other side, the back office part, the operating side, we had not done a good job with. So I wrote manuals. And when we got the manuals out into distributors, as you can expect, their performance improved, their profits improved. And again, marketing effectiveness, it's not just taking the product to the middleman, to the customer, but enabling that to happen in a way that everybody benefits from the transaction. That was number 2.
So you look at the entire picture, which is number
Right.
1.
Right.
Get down into the weeds, which is the
Bill of material, right down to the nuts and bolts.
2. What's number 3?
Number 3 was is the Fortune 50 group. At this point in my career, I was with US West, which was one of the regional bell companies that spun out. A great organization, and I love being part of them. As they went through divestiture and were told to break up their piece parts, they had to enter the competitive arena, selling public, what they call private business exchange telephone systems, electronic key systems, because people were disconnecting from their wires in the wall and putting in their own operating systems. Well, once again, we were trying to figure out the best way to do that. And we took a similar approach to what I did with the Executone on training. But the real breakthrough here was we had a federal government division in US West. US West has a lot of federal facilities out here in the West, a lot of military bases. And they were under a mandate to divest from us and put their own private exchanges in. Well, we had nobody in the company who understood how that worked. I didn't either, but the boss said to me, Bill, we want you to run that. So I got called in to learn how to deal with that whole contracting and solicitation process that the federal government had been using for other things than telecommunication services. So that was my next assignment. So the way I was able to solve that issue was to figure out again, what are the decision points in the process that government agencies, GSA, Department of Defense, and others were utilizing in order to make their choices. Which ones could we effectively compete in, and which ones were we better off leaving alone because we're not qualified or unable to perform at those levels. So we formed a division, federal government division. We took it from 0 to 100 and some odd $1 million. And the point that I used to emphasize marketing effectiveness was picking our strength and emphasizing that in the proposal process. And lots of people want to do business with the government for all the right reasons. But the one thing we could do and we could offer that many companies could not is we had a 150-year history of putting in and operating telephone systems.
Right.
So I emphasized the operating strength of the company. And then the technology and the pricing was important as well. But at the end of the day, most of us are always within a couple of percentage points of one another on those issues. But governments are not risk takers. They do not want to be wrong. So by emphasizing the fact that we know what we're doing, that we have experience at doing, and here's how we're going to do it so you can be comfortable it will be done, that was our competitive strength. And that enabled us to do some remarkable things. You can't see it on that particular background I have, but here on my desk I have the pens I signed, the 3 largest competitive contracts we ever signed for that division. One for 47 million, one for 74 million, and one for 110 million. And this is from a guy who couldn't even spell federal government.
Tens of millions here, tens of million there. Pretty soon you're talking real money. What's the 4th step?
The 4th one is another one on this one. I'm very proud of. This is my last assignment. I was working for a great engineering company here in Colorado called CH2M Hill. And CH2M Hill basically is a civil engineering firm, very, very good at that, and experts in water projects. They have a great reputation in that area. Well, like everybody else, they wanted to form a communications division. And getting into the communications business is not as easy as you might think. Remember where I was working in my last job, 150 years of experience, that's your competition. Well, CH was doing work for the cable industry. And they did a lot of work for the cable companies here in the United States. But at some point in time, the cable companies stopped building their infrastructure networks. And that business just kind of chopped off to nothing. So they had a division there that was losing millions and recruited me to see if there was something I could do about it. Well, when I joined, the very first thing I brought to their attention is, again, looking at what's taking place this time within the industry, not just your environment, not just your market, the industry. And what was taking place in the industry was the introduction of wireless technology, cellular. And the whole industry was transferring from wires in the ground to cell phones in the car. So we took around and said, all right, I know the mindset of the telecom industry. And if you want them as a customer, you better offer something other than your business card. Because this industry, particularly at that time, is spending billions and billions of dollars racing one another to put up cell towers. So if we're going to get in this game, we have to be able to offer them something they currently don't have. Well, I talked them into believing that we needed a technology partner, somebody who understood the parts of that structure we did not understand. People who put the wires together in the home and the antennas. These are the folks that we have no experience with. So we looked around and quickly found out that the big boys were already formed their supply chains. And we went down and formed an alliance with Ericsson. Ericsson is the leader in Europe.
Sure.
And Ericsson was right now trying to find ways to get into the American market as well. So we met with Ericsson and we said, okay, let's both of us understand what are the components, Bill's model again, sorry to drive you all crazy, but what are the components necessary to put up a cell tower? What happens? How's it done? Who does what? Well, the telecom engineers, the operating companies, build the architecture and they build the cell site locations. we need a cell tower here, we need something there. Okay, then what happens? Well, you have to acquire it. Somebody has to go out and get a lease so that you can build the tower and put a tower in the ground. Then what's required? Then there's a civil engineering process where you build the site, put up a tower, put in antennas, wire it, cable it, put in battery backup, generators. All of these different functions have to go into that one cell site location. So we said, how about if we put it all together in a package? So if the phone company has to do one thing, hire us, and we'll take care of everything. Well, since these guys were in a rat race to get the first towers up in the first market as fast as somebody else can, and in fairness to CH2M Hill, the company I joined, they were the masters of program management, project management. They had fabulous systems to do very complex things, very organized and on time. So we used that core capability of their company and added to it the technical piece from Ericsson. And then we brought in and subcontracted out the parts of the site development that we didn't have. And we gave turnkey prices. So we put up a tower for it. And as a result of it, I took that thing from $0 to $50 million in 2 years.
This is a great segue because what I wanted to want into is technology and marketing. And today everything is AI, artificial intelligence. You can't, what's the old expression? You can't swing a cat without hitting somebody talking about AI. Now, I have a daily message. It's my marketing, where I say I don't use ChatGPT. I don't believe in artificial intelligence. I believe in the real thing. And if you hire me, you get real intelligence, and you don't have to worry about copyrights.
Yeah, right.
Now, I just finished reading an article in this month's Fast Company magazine, where it turns out that the recording industry is now suing AI companies or companies utilizing AI for violation of their copyrights because they're impersonating the company's performers. You wrote something that I really liked, and I'm just going to read it. Many marketing professionals are obsessed with the capabilities of today's technology tools, and as a result, neglect to utilize their most effective mechanism available to them, their brain.
Right.
Now, I get into, I don't want to say fights, back and forth with people who disagree because they're using AI and they see it as a marketing tool. I use AI. And one person said that he uses it for mundane activities, frees them up. And I said, that's fine, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about writing books, writing articles.
Proposals.
Writing proposals. The problem is that with AI, it can be factually incorrect. There was an interesting article from Duke University where they came up with sources. The AI had footnotes. The footnotes were fictitious. There were no such. You don't have to double check the honesty of a professional writer if they say that it's in Bill Cobb's book, page 27. It's page 27, and Bill Cobb actually wrote a book. So how do you get people to transition either to AI or away from AI as part of an effective marketing campaign?
That's a great question. And one more time, I'll give you an example of my own experience.
Please.
I was getting ready to do a speaking engagement, and I went into chat, the AI program. I said, could you put together an introduction for me based on the profile I have on LinkedIn? Well, just a matter of seconds, as you would expect, comes back this one-page introduction. There was only this one significant problem with it. It has me as an expert in biotechnology, which I know absolutely nothing about. And it's listed my career with companies I never worked for. And what happens with AI is it's all in how you cue it, where you ask it to find the information. Otherwise, it'll find it wherever it finds it.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily true. It's just information that's available. So you need to emphasize with others that, yeah, there's some benefit to using AI. I'm not going to say that there is not. However, at the end of the day, it's your representation and your reputation that's being put out into the world. And AI has been known to utilize information where it finds it. And sometimes that information is inappropriate or inaccurate. So I'm not suggesting that you throw AI away because it can save a lot of time. But what I am saying is it's only a tool. It's like any other tool. And when I give this talk similar to the one we just had, the very first thing I ask people to do is take all your tools, you know, AI, constant contact, the whole list, just put them in a box and put them over there and start thinking about the components of what's going on in your industry, your market, the transactions you're trying to be part of, because AI is not going to answer those questions.
Yeah.
You're going to have to think.
It's the same thing, there's never anything new. What you're saying is you have to have the right tool for the right job.
Right.
And sometimes AI may be that tool, and sometimes it may not.
Yeah, you can't put all your eggs in one basket, and you'd be foolish to do that. Because if you're relying on that technical capability to design, say, for example, a proposition for you, your competition can do the exact same thing with the same tool.
That's
So
one
how
of
do
the
you
things that I
differentiate
don't
yourself?
understand, because someone can hire me to write an article on effective marketing, and I can say to ChatGPT, write an article, write 1,000 words for me on effective marketing, and somebody else can say the exact same thing. It's going to produce theoretically the exact same document.
Or certainly close.
Those are the simple, if those are the only parameters, it should be the same thing. So who owns what, and why do you want to give the same speech that the next guy who's going to be speaking on the panel that you needed the speech for, to give? So, but anyways, one last question. Well, I have a final question, but your entire career and everything that you've said focuses on change. And change, as is well known, is something that a lot of people are very, very uncomfortable with. So what advice do you give to people who have to deal with change?
Honesty is the best policy, without a doubt. I think one of the things management doesn't do well, we talk a lot about the what needs to be done, and we leave out a lot of information about the why it's necessary to do it. I notice your background has HR in it, and I'm sure you go crazy with individuals with those traits. But if most individuals are smart enough to know that if we're going off a cliff at 80 miles an hour, we're probably better off to turn. It's like that company I shared with you, Executone, that was making, intercom systems.
Mhm.
Well, they could stay making intercom systems and fade out of business, or they could change and to try and take advantage of the new opportunity within that same market space. So I think it's the why is the important thing. The other thing I noticed, because I've been the implementer of much of this, is that management structures are reluctant to give career employees the assignment to affect those changes. And the reason for it is they're uncomfortable moving their friends of 10 years and 15 years around the organization structure. And there is baggage from life experience that goes with those challenges. And in most of the assignments that I was recruited for, I was recruited from the outside, was to affect change, to your point. And when I entered those environments, I didn't have any baggage, I guess is a bad choice of words, but the only one I can think of right now, within those organizations that said, we always did it this way, you can't do that, you can't make that change. What I would come in and say, okay, let me share with you why I've been hired. Okay, your board and your senior team believes that these things are transactioning within our industry, within our market space. And our challenge, me too, is to find a way to deal with that. All right. So we can continue to send all of our sales effort to those contractors in Chicago. And it's a lot of fun because we all get drunk with it at the beer hall, and we know all the places they go. However, if we don't start putting some numbers on the board, we're going home. So we got to find a way to solve that problem. And we did, but there was consequences. We cut the sales force in half, meaning the contractor piece of it in half, and spent those dollars now on the architects and engineers.
I was laughing when what you just said about intercoms and not wanting to or the necessity to change, because I have one client for whom I wrote a book, and her royalty payments come to me. So then I have to go and deposit them in the bank. And her bank, she works with Bank of America, which is up the street here. And as I mentioned to you earlier, it's been hot and humid here. And when I got there, I walked with a cane. I must have looked like something the cat dragged in, because this lovely woman at the bank said to me, "Sir, why don't you sit down? There's a long line. I will help you with the deposit. You'll come into my office." So I sat down. She takes me into her office and she's doing what she's doing. And then all of a sudden, I hear over what I thought was an intercom, Sally, that's not her name, I'm making it up. "Sally, where are you?" And she turns around and she picks up a walkie-talkie. And I'm saying to myself, okay, I got to ask the question, why are you using a walkie-talkie? And she said, because this building is so large, it's the only way we can communicate. And I'm thinking, in this day and age, she still has to use a walkie-talkie. But anyways, before I let you go, I'm going to put up your contact information. And I want to thank you profusely. And the last question is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
Well, the one piece of work that is a sort of a legacy piece is I got together with an education professor over at Colorado State University. And at that time, I was working with a lot of young startup companies. And we said, there is no roadmap at this point in time, that's about 12 years ago, to help new companies understand what they have to do to get going. So we sat down and we wrote a book. And the book is called Business Alchemy, Turning Ideas into Gold. And it's out there. You can get it at Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all those places. But the point of the book was to help others transition from having a job to starting a business. And as a result of writing that book, we developed a workshop, which is one of the other things that I provide, not as much as I used to, but I do provide it, to help new business owners understand the different steps that they're going to have to encounter, challenges they're going to have to meet in order to get their companies up and running. And part of that book is actually being taught at Colorado State University as part of their entrepreneurial program. And I use segments of it to support our small business development efforts here in Laramie County.
Well, Bill, I thank you for coming on. You have provided a great deal of actionable information for people looking to turn their marketing efforts around and make them effective. So on behalf of the viewers, I thank you.
Well, Bruce, pleasure. Good to meet you.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.